Hi guys, in this video, this is the second video of the series. The last one I kind of introduced some terms and some vocab, showed you a picture of a graph and what we can expect. So this video, I'd just like to talk about some basic steps to graphing. And so I want you to understand before we get going that this is not a comprehensive list at all, okay? So this is step one, is to set the denominator equal to 0 and solve for x. But in later problems, as they get more complicated, that won't be the first step, okay? We're going to mix some stuff in as we go along and the problems become more difficult. Okay, but the first step really is always in every single problem, if I have 1 over x, I'm going to set the denominator, which is just the bottom of the fraction x, I'm going to set it equal to 0. I'm going to solve for x. All right, so if I have something like, I don't care what's on top, if I have like an x minus 2 on bottom, then I'm going to set that x minus 2 equal to 0. I'm going to solve. That means I'm adding 2 to both sides. That means x is equal to 2. Okay. Or if I had like a 2x minus 3 on the bottom of my fraction, I don't care what's on top, but if I had a 2x minus 3 on the bottom, then I'm going to take 2x minus 3, I'm going to set it equal to 0, I'm going to solve for that, okay? And in that case, that would lead to x is equal to 3 halves, or 1.5, okay? And you can check my algebra there if you want to, but that's what we're going to do. Now the reason is because that's going to tell us what would give us a 0 on the bottom of the fraction, right? It tells us what would create a 0 on the bottom of the fraction. And then, to take that one step further, the real reason that that is important is because you can't divide by 0. We can't put a 0 on the bottom, okay? So in other words, it tells us two things. Ready? Number one, it tells us the location of the vertical asymptote. So in other words, if I were to graph this thing here, you know, I've got some value on top, a 4 or a 3 minus x or whatever, I don't even care what's on top, but on the bottom of the fraction, if I have an x minus 2, that means that if I solve for x, x equals 2 would be a problem. That would be 2 minus 2 here on the bottom. That's a big deal. That also tells us that our location of our vertical asymptote, that is the vertical line that I would graph to start this out, would be at 2. So I would just draw a vertical line at right there at 2, and I get going with the graph. Okay? In this case, it'd be at 1.5. That also tells us, though, that the domain of the function can be determined from this. And the domain of the function, in this case, remember, domain refers to x values. What x values are okay? And in this, when we work with fractions, we're going to say, in this particular example, that if 2 is an error, if 2 gives us an issue because that's 2 minus 2, that's divided by 0, then in this case, we would say that x can't be 2. In this problem, we would say that x cannot be 3 halves. And so what we'll have then is x cannot be that value, you know, whatever number that we get that gives us a 0 on the bottom of the fraction. So that's why we set the denominator equal to 0 and we solve. That's going to have here what we would say is, on this problem, the vertical asymptote is at x equals 0. And if I asked you the domain, you'd say x can't be 0. Okay, so you would say the domain here is x cannot be 0, right? So that's the first step to graphing. I'm going to go ahead and cut it off there, and I'll make a second video for this step 2 on what we do next.